You are you are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. And it's Soccer Today. Unfortunately, no intro bumper, unfortunately, today, but welcome to Soccer Today. Duane Rollins and myself, Kevin Laramee. We are joined today by Luis Hernandez of the Cosmos Country Podcast. First of all, Duane, how you doing today?
I'm well, Kevin. Sometimes we could do without. I can almost mouth all that. Join us on the sports
Golazo,
podcast.
golazo, golazo. I
Yeah,
can mouth that any day.
yeah. I got it all going on. I usually say it out loud. So sometimes you'll catch me. You'll unmute me and you'll catch me talking over the British guy on the voice. But anyway, let's stop talking to each other and talk to Lewis. Lewis, how you doing?
Good, guys. Listen, I'm listening to you guys talk about technical difficulties, and I have to say, as a fellow podcaster, you're singing to my heart right now.
Yeah,
and it's pretty rare on our case. I've worked pretty hard over the year to reduce the amount of risk. But once in a while, the only thing that's debating my existence right now, it's sometimes my tablet doesn't play an MP3 file.
Yeah, Lewis, we'll tell you one day about the great Ethernet cable travesty of 2015. But let's move on from that and talk about the New York Cosmos. And that is what Lewis is on here to talk about it and in general and to promote his podcast, obviously, a little bit. Whenever I have a Cosmos guest on the line, I always want to start with their origin story because I am always curious of what attracted you as a fan to this team. Was it as simple as geography? Was it something to do with their history? Was it something to do with the philosophy of the club as it relates to Major League Soccer? I'm curious, Lewis, if you could just give us your origin story of what made you a Cosmos fan.
Sure. I guess you could say it's a bit of a mix. My father was a Cosmos fan, and when I was a kid, he gave me one of his old pennants from back in the day with the old Cosmos. So, and that thing is actually still hanging on my wall today. So one day I'm in the city, and that's back when they had the deal with Umbro, and they had the sponsorship ads everywhere. And I see one that features the Borough Boys, the New York supporters group, the New York City-based supporters group. So I go to one of their meetings, start tagging along, start learning about the team that's coming back, and just sort of stuck with them. Definitely, I think there's a bit of a philosophy difference there. I'm not a huge fan of single entity. I love the concept of an independent team, and all these factors definitely just combined, and here I am now, podcasting about the green and white.
Fair enough. And if we just, before we get into the here and now, and I do want to focus a lot on the here and now because I think that's important. I do want to go one sort of looking at the history and the tradition and the mythology even around that name Cosmos and how much it connects you to the past and connects that team to that. Do you associate this current version with the past, or is it more of a nod to the past? Just where do you think the current version of the New York Cosmos fits as it relates to Pele and the glory days of that name anyway? Where do you think that fits?
Totally. I think the club takes great efforts to acknowledge the past. Obviously, when you have players like Pele and Beckenbauer on your team, it's not something that you're just going to give up easily. I do think that there is a healthy amount of Cosmos supporters, Cosmos fans, who identify themselves with the team as it is now. Local New York City club, a bunch of New York players on there. I think last year the signing of Raul was kind of a nod at the past in a way, was kind of just another great player coming through the club and making his mark before winning a title and sailing off into the sunset, so to say. But I think there is a healthy connection between the past and this club. Are they the same? Not 100%, obviously. Look at where the club is now compared to where it left off decades ago. But I think there is a connection.
When you look at the Cosmos in 2016, Lewis, what is the one thing that gets the team going this season? What is the one thing that propels them to success, both in the stands and on the field? What is a word that would you describe the Cosmos with?
I recently went to an Indy 11 match back in April, a road game that the Cosmos played. And I remember something that one of the local supporters wrote about the Cosmos, and that's that they never have to rebuild; they just reload. And that's kind of stuck with me just thinking about that. But with the Cosmos, it's a mindset. You come into this club with the expectation of performing well, of winning, of continuing a tradition of victories. And I think a big part of that is testament is to the leadership. I think head coach Giovanni Savarese has played a major part in leading that charge on the field. I think the front office has, done what they could to at least with signings of Raul and other motions to kind of keep that tradition going, to keep that mindset going. And I think it's paid off. At least within the NASL, they've made the playoffs 4 years in a row now. Of the 3 playoffs they've played so far, they've won 2 titles. So I think I don't think that they're done yet. I think that they have a clear feeling that the U.S. Open Cup continues to evade their grasp, and I think there's a sense of frustration about that. I guess it's just a feeling of never being satisfied.
When you're looking at the Cosmos in 2017 and years to come, there's a lot of uncertainty with the NASL over the last few weeks, Lewis. What is your thoughts about the Cosmos in that world? Would you like a Cosmos moving into a potential USL if that would be the case, or whatever the case may be? Maybe the league is down to 8 teams next year. What is your thought on what's going on in the NASL concerning the Cosmos?
Definitely, NASL has. I think it's been a real source of concern for many Cosmos fans. I think most soccer supporters, the only thing they really want to worry about is their team, their club. They want to worry about what the signings are, moves on the field, off the field, front office, whatever. But the last thing they want to be worried about is the stability of the league they play in. So can you potentially have a great club and, oh my God, the league is just dropping out from under them, and now who knows what's going on? There's been added concern with, I think Midfield Press recently wrote an article about how, after speaking to some USL sources, it seems like USL would not be happy about the Cosmos potentially joining their league. And that's a source of concern. If the NASL were to fold, or if the NASL were to lose their Division II standings, and let's say USL gets moved up, it's concerning to think that the Cosmos might end up at D3 if they can't come to terms or something with MLS. And I don't know. It's one of those things where I've spoken to a lot of Cosmos supporters, and it's just pretty frustrating to see how the club does what the club operates decently well, but then there's this whole question of what's going to happen to our league.
Of the NASL teams that we follow most closely, obviously we're based in Canada, so Ottawa and Edmonton are the 2 teams that we have the most contacts at and have the most sort of knowledge about. And I know that within both of those clubs, which would be small market clubs in the NASL in terms of their budget and that one of the concerns and one of the feelings out there is that clubs like the Cosmos might be outpricing them. They might be pushing them out in terms of their budget and all that. So I am wondering whether if the NASL were to survive, but survive with a salary cap or some kind of salary structure in place that would prevent the Cosmos from spending whatever they want, whether that would be something that most Cosmos fans, in your opinion, would accept, or whether they would resist that based on that sort of resistance towards single entity about central control that you spoke of earlier.
I think based on the philosophy of what was presented as the NASL, which is a league where clubs can come in and independently build their rosters, build the team that they want to have, and subject to minor set of rules like the 7 international player rule, for example. I think that would ring extremely against that philosophy. It would. I don't think a lot of fans would like that. Now, with that being said, I know that you mentioned what about the Cosmos outpricing the rest of the league. As somebody who's been covering this team for a little bit now, I can say that it feels like the Cosmos have been playing, for lack of a better term, Moneyball. And they're trying to find good players, but maybe not name players that would cost them money, players that can still do the job of winning a title, but that would not be as heavy in the paycheck area. And if anything, I do think that definitely one of the big boys right now would be Miami FC, with the amount of money that they've been throwing around the rest of the league. They 2 of our loans were basically sent down to Miami eventually, and they signed one of our longest tenured players, Hunter Freeman. And from what we understand, they doubled the salary and whatnot. So I do think now being on the receiving end of the possibly getting outpriced by other teams, it hurts. But I think it stands against the philosophy of what the owners signed on for when they joined this league.
Lewis, when you're looking at some of the teams in the league, I'll take the Rayo OKC experiment this season. I say experiment because I think there's only 3 games remaining in that experiment, and then it's going to be just history. But after that, when you're looking at other teams, and you mentioned Miami FC and the Cosmos were the ones spending more before this year. They scaled it back a little. Miami took that mantle. But when you're looking at this league, what would you consider sustainable over this league? Because there is a lot of teams in financial trouble. We're looking at the strikers over the last few months, multiple reports of late payments and non-payments sometimes of players' salary. So, what would you consider sustainable? Because yes, what Miami is doing, spending a lot of money, but that money, where does it come from? And when you're looking at the attendance and revenue coming in, there's a disparity. Is that sustainable? And what would you consider the best potential or ideas for the Cosmos going forward or this league going forward?
It's funny when you talk about sustainability. When you look at a club even like the Cosmos, there's a lot of questions about revolving around where's that money coming from. And a team like ours, they're talking about personally paying for a $450 million stadium, paying for every aspect of its construction, no taxes, no kickbacks, nothing. But there is that question of where does the money come from? Clearly, it's overseas somewhere. You look at Rayo KC, and they look like that they were pretty much depending on Vallecano to kind of keep them up there. And once Vallecano went down, and it looks like they started doing a little more research into how OKC was running, they were unsatisfied, came through, and it looks like they made some budget cuts. I really like, personally speaking, what I've seen from Indy, for example. You see a lot of local support. You see maybe not a full stadium. I know last year their average was like 10,000 or something, and maybe not a full stadium now, but they still get tons of support. Even on a midweek Wednesday night match, they'll have lots of people out there, and I think that's absolutely vital. And for a club like the Cosmos, it's been really a struggle. I'm there every week, every game that they're there, and attendance definitely just trends downwards. I think we must be hovering around the 4,000 range right now, if that. And I don't know how long that's really sustainable. I mean, yes, the overseas money is helpful, but when you're in a market with 2 MLS clubs and in a stadium where you can't really access it easily, it's out of view of the typical New Yorker, away from public transportation. I think it kind of really throws a lot of curveballs at the Cosmos to try to fill that stadium up. It's not filling up, and it worries me sometimes. But I think to get back to your point, I really think it comes down to local support. It's just stuff you're seeing from like the Rowdies and Indy, the way that they've been filling their stadiums lately.
Well, let's continue to expand on that and focus it on New York. I mean, you mentioned the 2 MLS teams in the market, the Red Bulls and NYCFC. A lot of time what you hear, how you hear Cosmos fans try and distinguish themselves from those 2 clubs is kind of in the negative. They're sort of talking about how MLS's single entity is bad, or why those MLS teams don't represent them, or things like that, kind of negative towards them. But could you help me understand ways, from your opinion, that the Cosmos could position themselves in the New York market in positive ways to make people go to them rather than come from something else, if you follow what I'm saying?
Totally. I mean, right now, there's been a lot of rumors about where the Cosmos will play next year. And currently, one of the biggest ones is that they may end up at MCU Park in Brooklyn, which we actually played a match against Ottawa there. It's not confirmed in any way, but if they were to move to Brooklyn, I think that there is a better possibility for them to actually start to build something more sustainable there. With the location of Coney Island, you have tons of stuff that people come to go check out: the beach, Luna Park, the aquarium, anything. And on any given day, the walking traffic there is hands down head and shoulders above anything that you'll see at the Hofstra University location on Long Island. I really feel that they'll have to move to Brooklyn. They'll just have to find a way to embrace a community, maybe cross market with the Brooklyn Cyclones, who they'd be doing a ground share with, if anything, maybe even the New York Mets, and just really try to reach out to the Brooklyn community. There's great soccer support down there. Brooklyn Italians are in the area. You have great local communities of Russians, Ukrainians, Italians, and I think there's tons of ways to build it as a proud local soccer club down there. But I don't, where they are currently in Long Island, I mean, I can only see it trending downwards.
Yeah, because for real New Yorkers, Long Island is a stretch. They're trying to get behind a team, if I'm not mistaken. Look at the Islanders actually moved to Brooklyn now, too.
Yeah, my co-host, he's an Islanders fan, and, they've moved to Brooklyn and not. But he was one of those guys who it didn't matter. You just drive out there and check it out. But on a week-to-week, talking to a lot of people, trying to get out there. I know plenty of New York City guys who've gone out there game after game, and it's an effort. I live in Queens myself. That's right next to Long Island, and takes me over an hour each way to get there. And coming back on a Saturday night's a nightmare with the LIR, Long Island Railroad. Sorry, but it's just the local community has not really been turning out there, and it's a real shame. But right now, I think the best thing that can happen to this club is to move itself into kind of a temporary destination with a wider population base, with public transportation that basically feeds you right to the stadium. I think those are the most positive moves they could make for next season.
All right, Louis, let's talk about 2016 now and what's actually happening, which is the Cosmos on top of the fall standings, on top of the overall standings, a club that does seem poised to once again challenge for the Soccer Bowl title. What has been the key to the successful season? Obviously, a bit disappointed in the spring season to lose it the way it happened, but bounced back well. But so, what, in your opinion, has been the key to the team's success this year?
I think it's been a few things here or there. I mentioned the Moneyball aspect before. The whole concept of maybe not signing name players, but having players who can do the job, have proven they're dependable. And I think Gio Savarese has been huge in identifying those players from around the world who just fit in well with what he's built here. I think a part of it is just making sure that chemistry is there. And I think another aspect is just making sure that we continue to have a strong core. And, we have some guys who've been around for a long time. You have Jimmy Maurer in the net. You have Carlos Mendez, a captain, a local Long Island guy who, he's been around since the reboot's first signed player of the new modern era. And you have a number of others. And obviously, it took a little bit of a hit when Miami signed Hunter Freeman, who was also a reboot player from Game 1, 2013. But I think those are the biggest things. It's really been just making sure we continue to have that strong core, and making sure that we're signing players who fit the model right.
And to look at the league as a whole, who do you feel right now is most poised to challenge the Cosmos for that Soccer Bowl title? Do you think it's the 11, the oddly successful season of FC Edmonton? Who do you feel is the most likely to challenge them for that title?
Personally, I think the Indy 11 are more likely to challenge them for that title. I think that they've been fairly consistent with their play, and they may have hit a rough patch along the way somewhere, but overall they've looked pretty good and they've challenged well. I wouldn't throw away Edmonton. Actually, those guys, they're the way they play, they'll clamp down defensively. They'll kill you on a counter. It's a difficult league out there. There's few teams that I would say are not able to challenge the Cosmos, but in my opinion, I think Indy would probably be the one.
All right, fair enough. Off air, you were talking about you were going to Comic-Con tomorrow, so I'm wondering, any cosplay ideas?
No, I'm I don't go that far. Usually, I'm the one running around with a camera and just like taking photos of like all these people and all the work that they've done to show the love for the properties that they love, and it's great. I love stuff like that. I'm a little bit of a nerd myself, so I'll probably be blowing my piggy bank tomorrow.
All right, fair enough. You enjoy that and enjoy the rest of the Cosmos season. We appreciate your time, and maybe we'll touch base down the line. Thanks again, Liz.
All right, you take care, guys.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Luis Hernandez, the Cosmo County podcast. Give them a listen. For everyone who likes to think the NASL guys are unreasonable and all pro rel tinfoil hat wearing guys, I think that Luis might have proved them wrong.
I told you, Duane, the other day. It's just a small percentage of the population. They're just more loud. They're just louder.
It's a nice guy. Luis seemed like a nice guy. I do think that he's right. He did hit on something there. And in fairness to him, when I asked that question about outpricing the rest of the league, it is Miami that most people are now talking about.
But before Miami, it was Cosmos. Cosmos started that trend. Let's not.
For sure. And if you don't have cost controls on that, and that is a question that I do ask all NASL fans out there, is that obviously you want to support your local club. And Luis said that. I mean, the most important thing is most fans just want to worry about their team. And they don't want to worry about all these big issues like that. But if the NASL is truly in financial trouble, even if you do embrace that Wild West independence that the NASL has, and I understand the emotion behind that and why you would you be willing to accept a salary cap? Would you be willing to accept a luxury tax or something, or some kind of form, some kind of control at any rate that does put a rein in on salaries? And it is an interesting question. I think that most NASL fans have to ask themselves in the near future based on the noise that I'm hearing, Kevin.
No, exactly. It's going to be interesting to see the sustainability of some of the teams like Miami, because for a season you want to make a splash. You want to make a splash literally in the market close to the beach to get your stadium done first, to get your fan base there first, and before potentially Beckham and his MLS team, if that ever comes to fruition, which again we always doubt here on the show. But so they went with that way of doing things, spending a lot of money in the first year, trying to get wins, and we'll see what happens with them in the postseason and the standings. But is it sustainable in the future? And that's always the question. Even like the Cosmos have scaled back over the years to make sure that stability and the books can be closer to that black, because it's still a money losing franchise. What's going on now? All
right, yeah. And speaking of cost controls and central control, I wanted to talk about
the king of segues.
Jason Davis, who totally didn't used to host a show that we copied. That didn't happen.
No, of course, no, absolutely not. That's not exactly not what happened.
No, that's not something that happened at all. Anyway, he wrote an article for U.S. Soccer Players, I believe is what it is. Let me just find that real quick here so I can point you to it. But he wrote an article that relates to
MLS still has Major League perception problem.
Yes, USSoccerPlayers.com is the article. It's from there. So you can find out. Jason Davis wrote that. We all know Jason Davis, United States of Soccer Now on Sirius. It relates to what Bruce Arena has been saying, and there's been a lot of talk about this. Basically, the LA Galaxy and a lot of people associated with that team basically spoke out against the travel restrictions that have been on Major League Soccer teams forever now. And this is not.
Can you just remind people what are the travel restrictions if they're not fully familiar with them?
Yeah, well, if you're not fully familiar with them, they have to fly commercial. They have to basically get on with the plebes like us, right? Like,
and majority of the time it's coach. Yeah, you don't just fly commercial; you fly coach, and you're mingled with the rest of the world. You have allowed five chartered flight a year or something.
Yeah, and they also will make some provisions for CCL. They'll allow them to fly some coach back from Central America and stuff like that. And some of the teams do some tricks to get around it. I know here in Toronto, there's an airline called Porter that flies out of the Island Airport. And if you are familiar with Toronto, you'll know exactly what that is.
Oh, yeah.
And basically TFC, if they're doing a flight that Porter serves, will buy up the entire plane.
And
but they're still...
Joey Saputo has a plane. So I've seen players sometimes, some of the players, especially back in the USL days, have coming home with Joey Saputo's plane when they had a good game.
Yeah, which in MLS he'd have to be careful with, because
that's what I'm saying. Back in USL days, they used to do it all the time. Now it's a different situation.
Yeah, they allow the DPs are like basically the DPs will fly. They can't even fly first class, right? Like the DPs will sometimes use their own money to upgrade to first class after a flight. And this is what Jason writes about in this. They're absolutely right. It's a perception. They call it Major League Soccer, but it's not very Major League when you're doing that. Like there's no league in North America, no high level soccer team in the world is flying their players commercial anymore.
Can you imagine the Maple Leaf, the Canadians, or I don't know, a team like the Detroit Red Wings or the Rangers flying commercial, or like Sidney Crosby singing commercial flight, or having, I don't know, Derek Jeter or a let's go more recent here, I don't know, a Madison Bumgarner here to be topical.
Very topical.
Yeah, to being coach. No, you'll never see that because you'll have a lineup of people trying to disturb him. What's happening now, the example illustrated by Jason and other sources, you have the Galaxy players that have been told by Bruce Arena to dress like casually, no logos, no mention, and put a hat, put glasses, put your big earphones, and trying to mingle in the crowd, not to get disturbed. And yeah, it's getting to a point that it does give a non-major league, to not say bush league type of feel when that happens. And as a player, you don't feel the same way that when you're all walking to the airport stressed with your kit or your travel garment and you're traveling to the airport together to get to your charter flight. Yeah, that's what it's supposed to feel like. You're supposed to feel special because you worked all those years to get that professionalism, quote unquote, next to your name. And when that happens, it doesn't really feel professional.
Yeah, and look, the league apologists, well, they'll defend this. They'll defend this as, well, not every team can afford it, and charter flights are expensive, and blah blah blah, and parity. Well, every time I hear parity, I pass out and wake up 3 days later. That could be something else that's causing that, but nonetheless, it really does just make my eyes glaze over, right? There comes a point in any given league where the parity controls that are there get absurd, and Don Garber worships at the feet of parity to the point of absurdity at some points. And Don Garber, of course, represents the owners. And when, a lot of fans have been doped into believing that parity is good for fans because it's quote unquote allows every team an equal chance to win a championship. Well, that's a load of crap if you really look at it carefully, especially in Major League Soccer, where the DP rule is completely betraying that parity idea. And we are quickly approaching a time when only the richest teams will win anyway.
Not just that way. When you're looking at what Jason illustrated as well, I'll take Montreal as an example, spends tens and 20s, 30,000 to millions, well, $30 million and plus over facilities, infrastructures, the club identity, all those type of things. And they would love to. If they could. They can't afford it now. Majority of the actual MLS team could afford. And if you can maybe have a partnership, a commercial partnership to have, I don't know, Delta Airlines, United Airlines, Southwest, whatever. Maybe not Southwest because then they'll be late and maybe we'll miss games because of late flights. But my opinions aside on flights, get a partnership with, I don't know, Alaska Airlines, go to the entire league, get a way to lower the cost, but you need to have chartered flights, especially with the calendar the way it is now. You do have sometimes with the CCL, with the US Open Cup or American Canadian Championship, a lot of games and a lot of travel needed in a short amount of time. So chartered flight just makes a lot of sense across the board now because, first of all, flights are cheaper now than it was 20 years ago when the league was created, and this is one of the old relic rules in this league, and I think it really needs to change. And I think Jason is right. It's one of the last thing that holds MLS down in the perception of people.
Yeah, precisely. And as I said, the richer clubs are finding ways around it anyway. Like I said, MLSE will simply identify a flight that's going to where they need to go and buy all of the seats, including the ones they don't need on it. So that's only their players on it anyway. They're still beholden to the delays and things like that. And then they're still, running, it's still technically commercial, but nonetheless, it's kind of a way around regardless that allows them to be more comfortable on the flight. Just let a company like MLSE spend its money the way it sees fit.
And you're saying TFC, I'm pretty sure this is a practice that is made across the board in the league as well.
Yeah. All right. On that note, let's take a quick break. There's not much more to talk about that one. I mean, we kind of all agree with it. It's a stupid rule that is there to protect an idea that I think stupid, which is forced parity. But nonetheless, that's a debate for another day. Let's take a break.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS post-game show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
And welcome back. Quickly, an item that was on the agenda that we're not going to really talk about too much, as I did want to get it out there, is Atlanta United made a decision to start the 2017 season at Georgia Tech's Bobby Dobbs Stadium. This is kind of a smaller stadium. It's metal bleachers. It's not a long-term solution, but what it's going to do is allow them to avoid one of those TFC-esque road trips to start the season. So Atlanta will start 2017 at home. They'll be able to play a couple home games there before moving into the new Falcon Stadium.
It is a American football stadium, but it does have a closer to the action type of feel to it. It's one of those newly type of designed soccer stadium where you're closer to the action. There's a bit of incline on the actual stand, so you feel like you're closer to the pitch. So with the pictures we've seen, it actually might be conducive to a pretty decent soccer atmosphere for the beginning of Atlanta's journey in Major League Soccer.
And I still have my fingers crossed that TFC will be drawn to Atlanta in sometime in the early part of the season, because I would like a little tiny bit of a winter escape, although Atlanta is a little cooler than you'd think in March. But then it becomes
Atlanta. And always was a not dream, because I would be pushing it, but it's one of the destinations that I would like to see in the United States because of, well, the beautiful gardens, the type of thing that we associate with the South. Atlanta has it all.
Yeah, try Savannah. Savannah's gorgeous. I spent quite a bit of time in Georgia in my early 20s. Anyway, all right. So I like Atlanta, and that's the point there. But I wanted to move on to it. There's quickly on that too. There's another story that I wanted to briefly mention on Atlanta, and I do like a lot of the things they're doing, and I do think they're going to launch as probably the most successful expansion franchise since Seattle. That's my opinion right now, based on the moves I'm seeing. They're already involved in the Generation Adidas Cup right now. They play their first game as an academy against MLS academies today. So that's an interesting thing as well. And it just shows, kind of by surprise. I don't think anyone thought that Atlanta would come in this seriously, and they are. So good for them for that. But let's move past that right now. And
just the signing of Gerardo Tata Martino just laid the gauntlet down too. It's like, look, we're serious here. We might be just getting a name and somebody that's not proven in MLS. But if you're looking at the Premier League, we're celebrating the 20 years of Arsene Wenger here. Just look at the amount of foreign coach in the Premier League. And at the beginning, when they hired Wenger, there was only 2 others in the history. When he was the third one, foreign coach in the Major League, in Premier League. And look what happened since then. Same thing could be said in Major League Soccer. Oh, we don't really have a lot of experience or foreign coach coming here and getting success. That's all about the change. And maybe Tata Martino is the Arsene Wenger of MLS. What I mean is the first foreign coach to get a lot of success that would finally change people's mentality. When I say people, it's people in front offices of Major League Soccer clubs that decide who's their head coach or not. And when you try to go foreign, maybe we'll get more bigger names coming. And that because Tata Martino would have accepted to be a pioneer here.
Yeah, and it's the other thing about that is just a salary cap on coaches. So another way that those rich teams can sort of set themselves apart unless they start loosening the overall rules. At any rate, let's move to the story about CONCACAF. Victor Montagliani was talking in Europe this week, and a couple things, of course. One really interesting thing that I'm going to get to in a minute. But before we do that, one thing that did actually headlines were this. Is that he feels that CONCACAF needs to rebrand itself. That basically it will no longer be CONCACAF. It will be something else. That they will come up with some new name, some flashy logo.
CONCACAF or something. What could it be? The North American Soccer Association Federation, NASFF. That doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to be. CONCACAF has always been a bit of a strange little acronym.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah, like the Americas, it's hard to say.
Well, the Americas, Soccer Federation, the ASF or the AFF,
American Football Federation, the
Americans Football, the Americas Football Federation.
Yeah. The only problem with that is that some people I know that Canadians bristle sometimes at being called Americans because, we're in North America, but we're not in America.
Just for the North. So the NASF, but that could be, yeah. So, yeah.
And then the Central Americans might get confused, which is why CONCACAF is such a strange acronym, because you had to get all three different regions in there to not irritate anyone. Let's just call it Rainbows and Sunshine Inc. I like that one. Or the Unicorn Football Federation. I like that one.
I thought we're trying to get rid of the unicorns. So we're trying to get rid of all that.
Unicorn Football Federation.
Trying to get rid of the magic in CONCACAF. No more backdoor dealings. We're trying to get everything transparent. So maybe the Transparent Soccer Federation.
The mirror, the open. Anyway, we could go on forever on this. Is he right though? Does they need to change that?
You know what it reminds me of? Here's an example. Remember Enron? The big scandal, Enron?
Yeah.
Well, they changed their name, and guess what? That company's still in business today.
Yeah, there you go.
So maybe there's an idea to it. Maybe it's because that practice is taken from the business side, where when you have a big company with a bad name attached to it, or a bad experience, or a big recall of name, you change the company's name, and after a few years, people don't associate the name and the controversy that happened, but that name, what it can become. It's an idea. Maybe just merging CONMEBOL, CONCACAF would achieve that situation. You're gonna have to change the name then. So, I don't know how changing the brand per se, how much of a priority it should be, but no, it's a thought experiment, that for sure.
Yeah, it's very much a corporate thinking thing. Right? Like they're thinking like a business here. Exactly like you said, the Enron situation. Yeah, that's kind of where it is at. Anyway, that's Kevin, let's move on to the more important part of what he said here from our perspective. This didn't catch the actual headlines, but I'm going to read a quote exactly from this. This is Victor Matagliani, the new president of CONCACAF, and still the current president of the Canadian Soccer Association until probably till their board of their annual general meeting, their jam. So this is a quote from Victor. The more I think of it, the more a regional bid is talking about, that's in brackets, it makes a lot of sense. He's talking about the 2026 World Cup. It would probably be consistent with how we govern soccer in our region. Now, this is something that goes completely contrast to any other public statement that Victor has ever made in terms of the 2026 bid, which, of course, Canada has long indicated is one of its central points of trying to, get itself into the next generation of growth. So the fact that he's now talking about a regional bid, which would include the U.S. and Mexico, assumedly, that's a significant sort of statement that he's making, Kevin.
No, absolutely. So it's going to be interesting, because if he mentions regional bid, it's slowly trying to take the win out of the sail of a Canada 2026 and maybe a North America 2026, or a US with 1 or 2 games in Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver type of thing. So no, we'll see what that entails to become this regional bid that Victor Montagna is talking about.
What's interesting is that this is, of course, something he's saying as the CONCACAF head, which, as I said, is contrast to what he said as the head of the Canadian Federation, and whether or not he's now saying this because he's working more closely with the U.S. and Mexico, whether he's saying this because there's other deals that are in place. A lot of people speculate that one of them, that maybe this is something that's now being said because the U.S. is about to back off on its Canadians domestics and MLS rule. And that's something that a lot of people, Kevin, have said to me before off the record, is that if the USSF would be willing to perhaps move on that if Canada was willing to perhaps move aside as it related to the World Cup bid. Because as much as some people in the United States like to sniff at the idea of Canada hosting a World Cup, the reality is, for a lot of different reasons, the bid is equally as likely to win as an American bid, in my opinion. The infrastructure is a little more ready down there. There's no doubt about that. But the idea Canada can't build stadiums is absurd if you look at our history of hosting major events.
You want to know how I look at it? You remember 1994, how it was, and how, well, you do remember I was a young kid, and I do remember it for different reasons. Here, full disclosure, I was sick for 2 weeks in my life, and I was in a hospital with intravenous treatment, and it was during the 1994 World Cup. So I remember watching games on my very tiny, about 8-inch screen back then on my TV in the hospital bed. But when I think about 1994, as a whole, communications, TV, social media, while social media was non-existent, but other medium were not the way they were today. And in the global United States of America, the way it is now, to have a World Cup in that country and all that it would means for social media, hashtag World Cup USA, and how big it could become, and how you just adapt stadiums like the Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis that has 100,000 people, the Cowboy Stadium. You change them a little bit so it's more for soccer for that month, but the amount of crowd, the amount of that bid could be quite impressive when you're looking at the state of stadiums at 100,000 capacity right now in the United States. It could be something special.
Yeah, well, and this show launched with the Copa Americas, right? Copa America Centenario. The Centennial Cup, as we like to call it back then. We launched with that. It's
a lot easier to say.
Yeah, we launched with that. And really what that tournament taught us is how much money you can make in the United States. I've always rejected that you can't make nearly as much here, though. Certainly there's as much corporate support here, and it's the same kind of time zone. And as we saw with the Women's World Cup, you can fill stadiums, especially when the bigger countries are involved. And the Americans are a bit of a different gig when it comes to a Women's World Cup, but nonetheless, certainly Canada was a pretty successful one there. So it's not that we couldn't host it, but at the same time, there probably is a bit of realism clicking into Victor's position right now, in the sense that if we're tied into a North American wide bid, and if FIFA is serious about perhaps at least giving the optics of reform out there, then maybe they're not going to force one country to try and get all the infrastructure built. And instead, you have a final, Azteca is involved. You've got several stadiums in Mexico, obviously, are good enough to host it. They have great infrastructure down there, but you have the historic stadium that's already hosted World Cup finals in Azteca that you can get involved to host maybe the opening game. You've got the Rose Bowl. It's kind of falling apart a little bit. Maybe you don't put that in the thing, but you mentioned
by then, Duane, you have the new LA stadium that's going to be done and built and going to be all brand new and shining.
Yeah, and
because you need the LA Rams Stadium, and so you will have the Vegas Stadium probably built by then with a Vegas team. You'll be able to have, example, the World Cup with a game in Vegas, a game in LA, game in New York, Indianapolis, Minnesota with the new stadium. You have it could be quite spectacular with the different. And then you mentioned Azteca. You have one in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver. You can have crazy stadiums history in all North America with that tournament, especially if you go to 48 teams, Duane.
Yeah. Well, it beyond the, I think that BMO Field by that point will have expanded to the point that it would be eligible to host a group stage game anyway.
Or Rogers Stadium or something. We don't know. Maybe by then they'll have an NFL team and a new NFL stadium in Toronto.
Yeah, so, the only debate would be where the final and where the opening game was held, especially if three countries are involved, because one of those countries, and we all have a feeling we know which one of the three it would be, might be shut out from that.
The final will be, of course, in LA, the brand new stadium. Like, come on, we all know that. Yeah. And it will be the first year that Cristiano Ronaldo plays for that club. So,
yeah, the other thought exercise here is that do you include, if you're going to have a regional bid, why exclude it to just the three biggest countries in the region? Why not also open it up so that if someone has a stadium that's worthwhile in Costa Rica, in Honduras, in Jamaica, even in the Caribbean somewhere, why not include that? Obviously, I think right now the infrastructure is such that it only seems likely that the three biggest countries would have that, but I don't necessarily think that if you're going to have a regional bid, you could just shut the rest of them out. You'd have to be a full regional bid. And that would be interesting. And it's something we've talked about on Five Rings a lot. when we're talking specific to Olympic bids, but it also works in the FIFA case, and we're seeing it with Euro 2020 as well. Why not host these things in multiple countries? What the hell's wrong with it? They're essentially TV events now anyway. There's no need to have them in one place. Yes, traveling fans are going to have to make choices, and that would be the biggest complication there. But it's going to be a complication anywhere you hold it in North America. Even Mexico is a much bigger sort of physical place than most of the countries that host the World Cup, right? And it's going to be a challenge for people to travel.
Mexico is bigger than many countries put together.
Yeah, so especially Canada and the United States are both massive. They're, if you host a World Cup in the United States, and you have England, let's be stupid here and think England wins the World Cup. England wins the group in New York.
Yeah, that's truly being unrealistic, Duane, here.
Then they have to travel to Houston, then they have to travel to Seattle, and they have to travel to LA. I mean, that's still going to put a lot of burden on their traveling support. But
let's not say maybe a game in Florida, maybe a game in New York. That's the beauty of it, though.
Yeah. And anyway, we'll see. It's just interesting to me that Victor is now making noise about a regional bid rather than a Canadian bid. And we haven't heard a lot about the 2026 Canadian bid since they announced it. Obviously, it was a bit derailed by the FIFA scandal stuff. Well, not a bit derailed. It was like everything else, completely derailed.
And by Victor's nomination as CONCACAF president as well. That has a big say in that decision or that bid going forward. So that's interesting there too.
All right, let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk maybe a little bit about that 48-team World Cup and the international games that are taking place today.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
All right, we're back. Canada plays at 3:00 today, first game after they bailed out of World Cup qualifying. If you don't want to feel guilty when people are singing "Where were you when we were blank" in 2020 in 2022, you better be watching it 3:00. Although I'm turning it off at 4:30 to watch the Jays. I'm not going to kid yourselves. Anyway,
yeah, true, right? The Jays Rangers starts today in Texas, but no, a lot of games, especially in Europe. There are the European qualifiers, so not just friendlies going on in the international break, especially this one. A lot of qualifiers with a lot of interesting storylines. If you're looking at Iceland, can they replicate their qualifying to the Euro? Can they do that for the World Cup? They have a big game today in Reykjavik versus Finland. It's type of a derby as well, so Iceland can get that victory. Kosovo, Croatia, very, very interesting matchup. When you talk about derby, this could get ugly.
Yeah, look, I like the Austria-Wales is an interesting matchup in terms of just that should be a fun game is what I'm getting at with there. Just going through the rest of these. Italy-Spain is obviously the one that most people are going to be interested in. And
funny how those two are in the same. Well, only one of those two is going to get the direct qualification here. The other one is going to have to go through the playoff system. So it's going to be interesting to see because the winner of this game today between Italy and Spain in Torino in Juventus Stadium is probably going to win that group.
Yeah, another interesting one too. Turkey, Ukraine. Those are two teams that you would think would be battling at least for a playoff spot in their group. The Republic of Ireland, Georgia. That's not necessarily a huge one. Moldova, Serbia. You'd think the Serbs would be pretty massive favorites there. Macedonia, Israel, and we have Liechtenstein versus Albania. Albania, they're going to get their. I don't know whether they can replicate their European qualification or not because I don't think they're going to get a default win this time around. So that's going to be a bit tough for them.
By the way, across the board, this is the second game of the group stage, so there's a lot of games still left to come, but you do not want to get results go against you right away. If you're looking at a team like Portugal, yes, their group seems easy, but they already have a loss already, so they need to turn around quickly to make sure they don't get behind that 8 ball and have to get points late in that qualification process. You want to have your ticket to the group stage and lead that group earlier on and not have those late games mean something, because then it becomes no tomorrow type of games and then anything can happen. You want to make sure that you get the points you want early on in the group stage game in the European qualifiers.
Yeah, precisely. There's always inevitably, when you look at the groups and you go by chalk at the start, it never quite works out that way, right? There's always going to be one of those bigger clubs that bails out. Like, I mean, you think of Holland last time, although we've seen Holland as they started their campaign this time, not as exactly on top of the world either. So,
and even maybe missed that was Euro being, even though there was 2014, they still missed it.
Yeah, well, precisely. That's what it is. Yeah, and look, so you want to get off on a good foot there. There's games tomorrow as well. Obviously, the U.S. game is tomorrow. Canada, as I said, at 3:00 today. If you want to watch that game, it is on CanadianSoccer.com. And if you're going to complain about it not being on TV, I need you to really take a step back and think about this. It would cost the CSA probably $100,000 to get it on TV, and because there is a Blue Jays playoff game on at the same time,
nobody would watch.
You would have 16 people watching it, and it'd be like, Ben Massey, we can name the names, literally.
Us,
yeah. Literally, that would be
Fred from Montreal. Fez will be listening to.
Yeah,
and Vince from Markham as well.
You got to get Vince in there too. Yeah, that would be like the list would just be like a list of names watching that game. It might you can watch it online if you want, though, guys. And if you're not a cord cutter, you can actually probably watch both at the same time, and it's probably what I'll do. I'll find a way to watch both. Well, I mean, look, you don't have to watch pregame. Game starts at 3:00. It'll be over by 5:00. Blue Jays first pitch is at 4:50, so you're only going to miss 10 minutes of the Jays game.
Yeah, basically,
baseball,
not even
3 hours.
It could be like not even an inning if you're lucky. Like, you never know.
Yeah. And put it on the radio. Listen to the baseball on the radio. Baseball's brilliant on the radio anyway.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of Vince Scully, I remember my Vince Scully, me being a radio type of guy, being an audio guy, shocking, right? A guy who does like a million podcasts. He's a radio guy. I always used to love to listen to baseball on the radio. There's nothing quite conducive to radio quite like baseball. Soccer, it's pretty good on the radio. Like, I get my fix with it, but nothing quite like the Expos on a hot and summer days. The Padres. Oh, what games. They were so amazing.
Yeah, I used to listen to CJBQ, David Foote's station in Belleville. We used to have the Expos games. They were the last holdout in Ontario. CJBQ was. They had played the Expos games even into the 80s when the Jays were getting good. They were the holdout. They still had the Expos games in Ontario. It was the only place you could hear them.
Funny thing you mentioned, Belleville, up until the Senators arrived, there was a split 50-50 in the fans between Montreal and Toronto. Well, it's quite funny because geographically it's almost smack down in the middle of the two cities. So in the actual city of Belleville, before the Senators came in and tried to, especially now with the Belleville Senators in the AHL, but when the Senators arrived, it changed the landscape of the fan base. But before it was 50-50 with Montreal and Toronto. So I'm not surprised, actually, that you mentioned that the Expos game were on the radio there.
Yeah. It is not to get off target here, but yeah, it's probably still 50% Leafs fans, 30% Habs fans, and the rest are a mix of Senators fans and others when you're talking about hockey. But that may change with the AHL team coming in there, as you said. Let's get back to soccer, though. We did mention the 2014 World Cup there. Sorry, the 2014.
It's even worse.
Time machine backwards now.
42. 48.
48.
Jesus. We might make the World Cup.
Here's the thing about it. All of the headlines scream 48-team World Cup. When you actually read the plan, it's still a 32-team World Cup that they're talking about, a 32-team tournament. They're just having a final world playoff for the final spot. So you have 16 teams go directly, and then you have 32 more teams that are going to play in a playoff to get those final 16 spots. That's the format they're talking about. And when you think about it that way, it's not quite as egregious as what you're talking as what you're talking about, right?
But that still might mean that we might make the World Cup, at least the play-in. We will be in the play-in.
Yeah, if you consider the play-in the World Cup, sure. But I think that what it means and why you should be careful what you wish for if you're in a smaller country and thinking that way is that you'd likely get more European and more South American teams in is what would happen. Because and this has long been something that they've been screaming for, is for world playoffs for the final spot, so that you have a greater representation of the stronger confederations to make for a stronger tournament. So basically, Europe and South America have long basically been perfectly happy with the likes of us staying the hell out of their tournament because we're going to just water the field down. And that is something to think about there. And look, as a fan who has watched the last how many, I don't even want to count, World Cups without a home team in it, I do appreciate having a good tournament. But at the same time, I don't ever want to see a World Cup evolve to the point where it's just Europe versus South America, because that would defeat the entire purpose of the world part of the World Cup. You might as well just do like hockey and make teams up then.
Team Europe, Team Africa, Team Oceania. And you have a Europe and South American team, and like US, of course, because it'll be US. And then you have like Team North America will be Mexico and Canada.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing, too. When they were talking, when the FIFA scandal was going down, a lot of people were like, yeah, let's just pull out and create our own tournament. What I always used to say is like, yeah, be careful, because pull out and create your own tournament means you're going to be, you talk about pro-rel here to put this full circle in our entire show. Well, there would be probably a very limited amount of teams allowed to qualify into a closed tournament that is run by UEFA. Don't kid yourself, folks, at any rate.
Yeah, exactly. They'll be like the top 16 teams, and no, Liechtenstein will not be a part of those teams.
Yeah, well, yeah, they'd basically just create like teams that didn't have to go through any qualifying process whatsoever, because the club's world would take over and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. These teams are automatically going to get burst. There probably would be room for some kind of world playoff for like 24 teams or 32. Let's say they stuck with. They'd probably have like 24 of the teams set so that they're always there, and then there'd be like 8 teams, 8 spots open for the rest of the world. And if that's something that appeals to you, then cheer for that. Otherwise, maybe we're good the way we are.
Yeah, it'll never happen anyway. So
I think this 48 team thing probably is going to happen though.
Oh yeah, if you when you put it that way though, 16 automatic qualifiers, and then you have 32 teams fighting for 16 spot, like a pre-weekend till the work. You might have it at the World Cup venues like the weekend before, and there's a game, and it's do or die. You win, you go in. You lose, you go home.
Yeah, or you could do home and homes. But see, I actually support the 48 team format so long as they don't go overboard in giving more spots to Europe. A few more is fine, because I do agree that a few more would benefit the tournament, but don't make it all about them. And so long, in my opinion, is that it is labeled a world playoff, that it's not actually the World Cup, and that the 32 teams remains the cap on what is called the World Cup. Then I would support the 48. If you're going to like say, oh, this is the World Cup, which is eventually, we all know that's what would happen, because the TV money would be too big. It'd be like the Champions League playoff round now, which is they've somehow managed to make part of their make it seem like it's part of the Champions League, that final play-in for the last spots in the draw. So that's, I think, probably what it would end up looking like. All right, Kevin. On that note, as I said, where were you when we were blank?
3 p.m.
3 p.m. CanadianSoccer.com.
CanadaSoccer.com.
Make sure
yes.
Yeah, CanadaSoccer.com. Take a photo of it. Take a photo of you watching it so you can flash it to them when we're in Qatar winning the World Cup. I said winning.
You mean winning a game, maybe?
No, damn it. Screw it. Go for the search. Yeah, no.
Go big or go home. And until tomorrow?
I shouldn't drink hard lemonade until noon anyway.
Well, as someone once said, it's 5 p.m. somewhere. And until tomorrow, 11 a.m., have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.